Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, leading edge conversations awakening your authentic self for soul growth. And tonight is November 21st, 2021. And we have special guests, two authors who really bridge the East and the West of astrology in a wonderful book that's soon to be published December 8th on Amazon. Llewellyn Publishers is publishing it. Of course, you could probably publish. Anyway, it's called, wherever you order it, Astrology by Moonlight. And isn't that apropos? Today is the eclipse. Well, it's not today is the eclipse, but let's say because we're meeting with East and West, we're actually recording this on the eclipse. Thank you. I didn't quite mean to say all that, but I have, haven't I? And so, yes, it is appropriate. It is all about the moon, our best neighbor. And yet, what do we know about it? For those that know nothing, this is a perfect book. It's very explanatory, as I understand. But also for those that know a lot about the moon, because some of us are rather obsessed about the moon. We see it every night. If we have a good sky, changes in its phases, there's still big takeaways. So the two authors that I have the privilege tonight to be with is Tara Aal of California, USA, and also Aswin Subramanyan of India, which is on another day, 13 and a half hours away from Pacific time. So this book is that context of the lunation cycle and how it applies beyond the sun and the moon to all the planets. That's modern and traditional. And I'll explain why, because they bridge both the astrologies that have been with us since the beginning of time. Well, our time anyway, and way back before. And it's about cycles and phases. So let me tell you about Tara Aal. Tara Aal is an evolutionary astrologer, a writer, artist, and tarot reader, the author of Astrology by Moonlight, and co-author of Natural Astrology, Houses, Signs, Planets. And she has an archetypal approach that's experiential and takes the technique of planets on the first. And she created a series of YouTube videos called We Are the Planets. I really find that so appropriate and wonderful. Tara teaches and speaks in conferences. She has quite a wonderful resume. NORWAC, UAC, ESOR, Kepler College, and has publications, articles, thank you, and Mountain Astrologer. And she's a past member, in fact, of the Talk Cosmos monthly panel Planet Buzz, which I was so grateful for. She helped initiate our YouTube in December 2020 and has departed for many of her obligations as of June. She's currently the resident astrologer and lead writer for Sage Goddess and serves on the ESOR Board of Marketing Director, which is one of our great organizations in astrology. So thank you, Tara. It's a pleasure to return with you. And co-author Aswin Subramanyan is an author of Fidaria and Astrology by Moonlight. He is the founder and publisher of the online astrological magazine called Celestial Vibes. He has a foundation in Vedic astrology and a keen interest in Hellenistic medieval astrology. And so his practice blends the three of these traditional forms of astrology. Bridges quite a wonderful development that we're learning constantly on for modern astrology. In addition to being an astrologer, he has a double master's degree in finance and labor management, and works in an investment bank and interested in global economy and finance, which is certainly the name of the, how can I say, it's a sign of the times right now. It's impacting all of us. Thank you. And Aswin enjoys playing South Indian classical music on his electric guitar. That's sort of a bridge between modern and the ancients too. And your philosophy is just like mine. I love live and let live. If I had to choose one thing, I'd say that. I really answered to it. And you can find both Tara and Aswin on the website for Talk Cosmos, because they have websites. Tara's her names, and Ashwin's is the averdic.com. So thank you and hello. I'm so glad to have this maiden voyage, for me anyway, with your upcoming book, the Astrology by Moonlight. Yeah. I have a question. How did you come up with the idea for this book? Please.
I think it's a very, it brings a lot of nostalgia, but I think it was a divine call where we have to go back at least to 2018, and probably even before, where I found Tara's work in our mutual friend Smiljana Gavrankic's wonderful Infinity Astrology magazine. I think Tara had written some articles on tarot. Even though I don't do tarot, I just tend to read everything that kind of comes by my way. So I think it took almost 9 months to 10 months, probably even a year, for me to kind of reach out to Tara and talk about a little bit of astrology and exchange thoughts, that like what we are doing with each other's astrology. And I think I don't even remember how we ended up writing that Mercury and the Moon article. I think it was a very casual discussion, which ultimately ended up into an article. I think it's good to kind of mention it here. We kind of wrote the article and we pitched it to the TMA, the Mountain Astrologer. But with all due respect, I think they've been doing great work in terms of promoting astrological articles of exceptional quality over the past 30-35 years. But still, I think they did not want to go ahead with our article, or probably with the theme, for reasons unknown. But still, I think we are extremely glad, and it's a great thing that they rejected it, because it ultimately turned into a book, which we never expected when we actually started writing the article. The first one was Mercury and the Moon. And since then, and I think all this came after our meeting in India. I think Tara and I met in 2019 in an astrological conference in India.
Right.
So so I think Tara will give her version of whatever. I think she so,
well, no, I mean, it's true. I don't remember all the specifics either, but we originally did a podcast together on your channel, and it was about evolutionary astrology. And so in that process, we started talking about the moon and about astrology. And you were talking about how in Vedic astrology, the moon is mind. And then we just started really getting into Mercury and the moon. And at some point, we just decided to turn it into an article. And the cool thing about this was, it's true, Frank Clifford was kind of the go-between. He was going to, help us get it into the Mountain Astrologer, and we were all excited about it. And it was Aswin who, this was about the time that we were both going to speak at that conference in India. And so we both knew there were other publications we could get that article in. But that's when Aswin recognized, he's like, I think this could just be a chapter. And we should back up a little bit, because this book does have a lot of basics, meaning it's got information on each of the planets really in depth. It has information on the soli-lunar phases. But what it does that I'm not aware that any other book does is it talks about the moon and phasal relationship with each planet. So in other words, what is your moon Mercury phase? What is your moon Venus phase? What is your moon Jupiter phase? Right. So
love it.
So and for us, there was no material to look this up. So we were really kind of investigating.
Pioneering.
And certainly, we're standing on the shoulders of Dane Rudhyar with the whole lunation cycle. And, I have such respect for Dane Rudhyar anyway. It was a delight to be able to take that material and work with it in a new way. But so we just, when Aswin says it's a divine calling, we both feel that way. And even in our working together, and feels like a very moon thing too. Like intuitively, we just sync. So even through all this process, I mean, we had some meetings, but we actually didn't have to talk that much stuff out. We just sort of naturally did it. Don't you say, Ashwin? It was interesting. We just really just kind of came out.
Well, that's a beautiful thing about language. And I'm thinking astrology is that language. Yes.
Yeah.
So that regardless of how, and the problem with astrology is we try to interpret it. So actually you could say it was a three-way street. It was like English and, Indians speak your language going into this other essence. So beautiful.
And we call it, Ashwin's very good to say this too, that he says it all meets in the heart. And that's very much the moon. And so for us, we weren't writing this book to try to give a bunch of answers. We wrote the book to really expand our consciousness around what working with the moon can look like in different ways to work with a chart that aren't so static, right? In some ways, we work with so many things that don't move. And this is a way to really work with sort of life cycles and phases are all about working with things as they move. And that's, that dynamic energy is interesting, but yeah. Well,
I have, unless you had another comeback here, Ashwin, I don't want to stop that, but I had another question. But what did you have shall I ask it, or did you have some feedback that you wanted to elaborate on?
No, here, I think as Tara mentioned, we did not have much to talk about. I think we had a total of 3 meetings for the entire book. Like one was just after the Mercury moon thing, when we actually decided, Tara went back to US from the Indian trip, and we had a meeting on Zoom, and that's probably when we decided that it's going to be a book. So when I pitched in the idea, and when we both, I mean, there is no agreement. We could just say yes. There's no other point of conversation.
Got it. So, amazing. Well, I was thinking. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that we also had a challenging time when both of us had some health issues by the third quarter and the fourth quarter of 2019, where we did not make much of a progress, which is when we again had to fall back and have a meeting. And since then, we never stopped. But I think we had one meeting towards the end when we were about to write about the outer planets' relationship with the moon.
Yes.
So that's the exact 3 meetings that we had for the entire book. So
how interesting. That's like personal, social, and intrapersonal. You could almost say, you had these 3 meetings and one comment, in a way. And I was thinking too, though, that the TMA, the Mountain Astrologer, Tem passed somewhere around 2018. So they were going through. I bet now with Ray Sapp as the publisher, she would be delighted to have anything of this nature.
Oh, but we mean it. We mean it when we say, like, we're delighted they didn't publish it. So
it's like and that makes me feel like that's like the moon. The moon, as we know, waxes all month until it wanes, and then it eclipses, such as on the 18th, 19th of November this month, or on the 4th of December coming up. And it's that experience, that one prompting the next angle. So because maybe that was really all about how it was relating to your planets too. Like, I don't know, but so maybe you've covered this, but you have 2 different perspectives and backgrounds, but it seems like it flowed even through the cultures, that this really wasn't an obstacle. If anything, you use the material as a resource, and it just, good.
Yeah. And for me, Ashwin's been such a huge, really instrumental for me. So Ashwin in Western astrology is a Sagittarius, and I have North Node in Sagittarius. So for me, doing this, like, by culture, East-West meets thing, and even me going to India, right, spending time in that space has been such a growth for me. And so even the ways that I looked at astrology, evolutionary astrology, just in our conversations, which weren't always in person, but even in our back and forth chatting, just hearing him say things, different words, different ways, and me having to sort of rethink language in the process gave me a new appreciation and understanding of stuff I thought that I had, understood. So, and that, I mean, what a nice example of that 9th house Sagittarian energy, right? That experience of something unknown that brings you back home to what you thought you knew. You know, it's I feel in some ways this book for me brought me closer to myself, and that came from getting out of myself. And so that's and that feels like a moon kind of thing too, you know, moon and home, and you know, finding that where we belong, and that it's not necessarily where we thought it was or how we thought it looked. So
that's perfect. And Ashwin, how for you and with your traditional, which is different from the evolutionary in some ways, although they both use the nodes hugely, you know.
Yeah.
So
See, I think it was quite easy for me to, work with a lot of things that's foreign to me, because I was very much introduced to Western astrology even before my association with Tara, but I was not largely introduced to the idea of the outer planets. So I had to spend some time and kind of go through a lot of things, and I had to read through Stephen Forrest's works and all those things, and I had to use outer planets for at least a year to kind of be able to understand what's happening. And especially when it comes to outer planets, I think there is a lot that I learned in probably just 1 hour conversation with Tara that I mentioned a few minutes back. Like that's the last call that we had for our book. So I think that was one of the most instrumental things, and that's probably the first time I actually took notes for our book, because I'm a very spontaneous person and a very organic person, and I don't have this habit of taking a pen and a paper and kind of writing it down. But I had to kind of have this schoolistic approach to kind of get in line with the inner space of the outer planets. So but apart from that, as Tara earlier mentioned, we did not have much of reference points, although the idea of planetary phases and the relationship between the two planets are not alien to astrological circles. But I think we kind of expanded on the soli-lunar idea of Dane Rudhyar, but the most earliest reference that we probably have to some extent is Firmicus Maternus, the 4th century astrologer, but we did not kind of have access to that at that particular point of time. I read Firmicus Maternus a bit later, but I think that is the most solid work that's ever written in traditional astrology, as far as I know, with regards to moon, its relationship with other planets. But still, there is no phases. So
Right.
I think with phases, I think we clearly expanded on Dane Rudhyar's idea of the sun moon to again with between moon and all the other planets. So and we had to kind of relate from our own personal experiences. So we used to talk how. So we used to talk how we used to kind of have this. I have this moon Venus opposition in my chart, so I had to talk about how it is, and I have this moon Jupiter and moon conjunction. So I had to kind of relate with my personal experience, and so did Tara. And we kind of had multiple conversations about how our own charts kind of taught various things to us. And given the fact that Tara is already doing her planet in first series, she probably was doing, I think you were doing it for probably 1.5, 2 years before our book. So I think all these personal experiences and prior astrological experience kind of helped us understand a lot of nuances, and especially the inner manifestation of what a planetary phase could kind of mean to a specific person, not in terms of just event manifestation, but also in terms of how things can manifest internally and help in personal growth and development.
That's the beauty. I am eager now to hear all and any insights that are coming forth, because really that is the fact, isn't it? The moon is our personal gauge, our compass to how we're feeling, how we're manifesting. It's in each of our different signs, and it's always shifting and telling the story. So again, yes, as it was just put on, this is Astrology by Moonlight by Tara Aal and Aswin Subramanyan of India and United States. So the wisdoms, what flushes forth that we have, that either, we can begin, either of you can begin to share that maybe whether it was, I mean, I know you spoke about Mercury and then you have the opposition with Venus, like how maybe, how would...
the one of the things that when we were thinking about this, the book is kind of from the point of view of the moon, right? And which we like because, well, I like especially because in evolutionary astrology, the moon really does link with the ego, the sense of separate self, not the moon by itself, but it's a big piece of it, right? And so the moon, and so you started talking about this moon being the most personal part of ourselves, how we react, our habits, our rhythms, what makes us comfortable. I always think about the moon as kind of our little okay meter. Like in every moment of my life when I'm deciding, am I okay or am I not okay? That's a big part is my moon that's making that decision moment to moment. And it's subconscious most of the time, right? But there's this piece. And so when we were thinking about, the moon inside of us, we were thinking about how does it bridge with the other parts of us? So each chapter in this book is set up basically like the moon and Mercury is bridging the heart and mind, right? Bridging the emotional and the logical mind. So each pair, moon with each planet, is a different bridging. And how those parts of you, for example, moon being emotional mind, Mercury being logical mind, the phase that those are in together shows you a lot more or reveals a lot about where you are in bridging or integrating those two parts. Yes. So, for example, if it's a new phase, the heart and mind or the intellectual, emotional mind have just kind of come together, right? I mean, astrologer Mark Jones talks about that conjunction, the new conjunction, like two people are on a couch for the first time together ever. They've never sat together before. So that's such a different feeling than, for example, full phase where they've been doing half the cycle together. And now there's, a different perspective to see each other. So but pretty much we dance kind of around or through each of the pairs in that way. And so, for example, Moon and Venus, bridging me and we, right? Moon being me, Moon being me, myself, and Venus being me in relationships. And so all of us can think about our own experiences of, everybody's different. Some people are more focused on the me, some are more focused on the we, right? And you can see some of that in the interplay between the moon and Venus. And again, the phase will kind of show you where you are in that development. What I want to mention that was especially cool about this is, and Ashwin and I agreed a long time ago that we wouldn't tell people who wrote what part of this book. I mean, some people may be able to figure part of that out. And honestly, some chapters we split up. Some chapters, one of us did the intro, one of us did the phases. Some chapters, so we tried it different ways throughout. But what I really enjoyed was when he wrote one, and I would go back and read my phase the way he wrote it. And it was just amazingly on point in ways that I would have never thought or said. But when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, like sometimes it would even be a little bit like, it almost felt a little bit like, someone getting you naked for a second because they see something that you're like, how do we know that? And so that gave me kind of more encouragement, like to work with this even more. And to this day still, I keep this little list of all my little phases on my desk and I go back and I relook.
I love this. Yeah. I just love it. Yes, I think that's, I love the idea of the synodic, not just the sun, but the two planets. Like last year we had Saturn and Pluto and we had, and then there was just recently Mars, of course, every 2 years. It's really pivotal. If how much information can we take in at any one time? But if we were to focus on something, and the moon is absolutely great. I think you have something to say here, Ashwin. I want to hear it, but I'm thinking of the moon and Mercury. If I remember with mythologies, that really the moon is our first thinking, isn't it? In some ways, yes. They're so related. There's some thinking about that.
I think moon is all about what we want. So it's a human tendency to kind of look at what we want at that particular point of time. So it's really not about what's good for us or what's bad for us. But I think Mercury kind of points out to us in terms of what's good or what's bad for us, because Mercury knows how to rationalize things, but Moon is pretty much a lot more selfish, and it's more worried about the native's heart and what he or she thinks. So I think that's probably the best differentiation that we can give, and it's more. I think it's more easier to kind of understand if someone reads the book, especially the Moon Mercury book. It kind of sets the foundation for the entire book. Actually, the introduction that we have given is quite solid. I don't think we could actually give a better introduction, but I think the entire idea of this Moon and Mercury kind of sets the foundation for the entire book. So people will kind of learn how to differentiate various phases and how to actually interpret different phases and different relationships between planets, because Mercury opposing the Moon is not the same as Mercury in conjunction with the Moon. It's completely opposite. So it's interesting to kind of play with these ideas and see how as Tara mentioned, Mercury is the rational mind or the logical mind, while Moon is the emotional mind. So it's when the Moon and Mercury are conjunct, it's actually like emotional mind and logical mind are in one place. But when they're actually opposing, so it's entirely different. There's a battle between the emotional mind and the logical mind. So the point of this book is to kind of the goal of this book is to point out that this is entirely different, and how we kind of look at it, rather than it's not like we point out like this is how it should be, but I think we just share our experience in terms of saying that this is one of those ways we can look at it. I think we are probably giving a new dimension to things that's largely less explored. Let's not say unexplored.
Which is why in the Moon, and I know we have to go to break, Sue, but in the Moon, it's not just emotion; it's also mystery, and it does hold our memories. In evolutionary astrology, some people say that between lifetimes we go back to the Moon. It's almost like this memory bank of our experiences, and so exploring this mystery, even if we can't put full explanations to things, I don't know, it made me feel like I knew parts about myself more than I did before, or at least I'd explored them.
I am so inspired. I thought we are going to take a little break here in a moment, but I am so inspired to get the book, and I thought I ordered it, and then I realized, well, it's not published yet. That's why I don't have it. Okay. I'm sure I did order it, and I'm going to double check, because really what you're beginning, everything has a blueprint. Like if we take anything, usually it's from Aries, like if we have a yod, it goes to the 150 to Virgo and Scorpio. So here you suggest, in a way, I'm interpreting this as a foundational, because it's really what a perfect way to say rational and irrational. Well, we will find out in a moment more of this mystery with Astrology by Moonlight with Tara Aal of the USA and Aswin Subramanyan. I think I said that right, in India. Thank you, everybody. We'll be right back. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the yin period of Scorpio, traditionally ruled by Mars, now ruled by Pluto. By departing a cycle based on comparison between extreme energies finding balance, Scorpio commits a relationship to exchange resources, experiencing power and powerlessness for the purpose of soul growth transformation. As a fixed water sign that is extreme, intense, and secretively deep, Scorpio's passionate nature questions the psychology and mystery concerning life and death.
Talk Cosmos brings you leading-edge astrological conversations with hour-long programs each week on KKNW. The show goes live every Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on Facebook and YouTube, along with daily chats throughout the week on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure you click like and subscribe buttons so you can get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or, if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. So, grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Justin Elzy, and I'm an archetypal and transpersonal astrologer. And you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk, 11:50 a.m., where we discuss planetary orbital cycles and their meaningful influence on our experiences in our lives.
Going against the grain has never been this much fun. Alternative Talk, 1150.
Wonderful, wonderful. We're back again, and this is about the book coming up December 8th. I think I'll have you just briefly say, but it is Astrology by Moonlight, and you're both co-authors, and it'll be December 8th, just in time for the holidays. And if anybody has time out, they can read it, maybe. I mean, immediately I get a book, and it's like, oh boy, I have to start it, but and so it's on Amazon and all the publishers, I would imagine. And
Yeah, I mean, it's through Llewellyn, so you can buy it everywhere books are sold. So it's,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's already
Llewellyn,
all over the internet, so
yeah, it's all over.
oh,
Yeah.
good, because Llewellyn also publishes. Every year I get their wonderful. If I can grab it fast enough and everything, but they're great. I don't think this was this year's book, but their calendar. I mean, I love it. The daily planner. I couldn't live without it. So Llewellyn, and that's it's great. Well, exciting. So planets. I read that you also do Pluto. Maybe you want to explain about the Moon and Mars and Moon and Pluto. I mean, I know
Do you want to talk about? We can mention. We can talk about. So Mars,
or anything you want. Yes,
Mars is bridging reaction and action, because the Moon is very reactionary in nature, and Mars is about taking action. And so in the book, we explore kind of some of the subtle differences and actually how the Moon, Ashwin, you should describe how you talk about like how the Moon kind of lights the stove or whatever that gets Mars going, which is such a good way to look at it.
I think, I mean, there are so many ways in terms of how we can explain or describe the relationship between two planets. But as she said, Moon is reactive in nature, and Mars kind of is all about action. So and another thing that we should not forget is Moon is emotional security, while Mars kind of deals with physical security. So it's so when two people are together, when two people are in a relationship, and if one person is Moon and the other person is Mars, so one person is reactive and the other person kind of waits on and he kind of acts to whatever Moon says. So the Moon kind of ignites the fire in terms of reacting, and Mars takes over and it kind of acts. So it's difficult to kind of associate one particular planet with one particular human attribute or character or tendency, because each planet can be described as egotistic. Like Moon has one particular ego and Mars has a specific ego. So I think it's kind of difficult to kind of put a planet inside a bottle and just call that it is just this. I think each planet, if I have Mars in the 5th house, I kind of express my creativity in a more flamboyant manner than
that's
what
me. I have Mars in the 5th house.
Tara's pretty flamboyant, so I'm kind of a bit subdued. So that's the truth. So I'm a little bit subdued in terms of how I express and how I go about things. Yeah. So Tara is more flamboyant, and so there you are. So you already have a live example of what we are talking in the book. So
yeah, I like this because I grew up with a gas stove and you had to light the pilot. right?
Yeah.
And then you bake the food.
Yeah.
And so I always think of the moon. See, I don't know if I always do, but I think of one's water and fire, those,
Mhm.
in their
And
natural
and
sense.
it is, yeah.
So it can create steam or it can put it out. And so I like this idea of initiating something that, again, you may initiate a torrent of water that puts you out, but it could also be
Yeah.
steam that replenishes the skin.
Well,
It's
And
yeah.
we think with the moon, like the moon really does want what it wants, and that's powerful. And Mars in us is quick to pick up on what we want. Mars is already linked
Sure.
with authentic desire. So
Yeah.
part of that lighting the stove doesn't have to be fire that lights it, right? Even that emotional desire or whatever to have something
Yeah,
is strong. And something else, the other words we talk about with Moon and Mars is belonging versus breaking out. Because, right, the moon, it likes to stay where it's comfortable. It likes to stay home, whether it's a physical home or just where it's comfortable in life, right? And Mars is the impulse to break out. And so in addition to the reaction action, we're also dealing with those two dynamics in here. So, should I stay? Should I go? Right? There's this whole back and forth thing, but it's funny how reaction turns into action, So there's, like Ashwin was saying, they don't think these things don't operate by themselves. This is why astrology is so dangerous, because we break things apart and nothing operates without the rest of it happening. I remind myself over and over again, if I'm talking about a separate thing, it's never the whole thing, because the separate thing it's not separate.
Yes, duality.
Yeah.
And pardon me for jumping with
No,
pluralism.
go for it.
That's the word, pluralism. I was just having somebody was asking, like, postmodern astrology, it's pluralism, where it's ever changing. And I think of what little I do know of Kabbalah. I did some talks with it, and about the Aries and the letters Aries and Taurus, and it became so evident, just what you're saying, that the direction of Aries receives whatever it's bringing, which is immediate. I mean, it's this almost like kinesiology. It's immediate. It's not. You're right. We tend to look at it like under a microscope, like, oh, what is this? Okay, blah, and define it without the relationship. And you're bringing in all the relationships.
And if you put Moon and Mars together, that's a powerhouse for going after what I want. The two of them together, I mean, that's a lot of, what would you say, Ashwin? Like lighting the stove and turning it into a big flame.
Make no mistake, we can actually put something inside a bottle and just say that something is very objective, but still I think there are different scenarios under which we would do it. Just to kind of elaborate on what Tara said, I think she kind of ignited the fire in me now. So it's like, a father, let's imagine a father who has a daughter. So the moon side of him would give all the security and care that his daughter needs. Well, the Martian in him would kind of take over when there is some kind of a danger that is occurring to a daughter. So and the manifestation would kind of take place in such a way based upon the phasal relationship of that particular father in his natal chart, or whatever his transits are prescribing. So it's just to kind of give a context. So
so Ashwin, would you say, like, so for example, if the moon has more leverage in that relationship, then
it's more emotional.
Yeah, well, and also probably the more nurturing, protective sort of the instinct to, like, take care of it is here. And if the Mars is stronger, right, it's just like, it's like a different energy leads. We talk about, Ashwin, you mentioned, so for example, when the moon is close to Mars in the waxing part, the slower moving planet, in this case Mars, has kind of a lot of power, right? The moon is like under the influence of that planet, and until it moves away a little bit more, it doesn't have much perspective or as much agency on its own. So this is one way you can think about it with all these relationships, right? It's like, for example, if for me, my Moon Mercury phase is crescent. So my moon is my moon, like my mind, Mercury has a big hold on that energy. And I mean, and if you know anything about me, and not the fact that I just have South Node and Gemini on top of it, but it's very, very true, right? For me, sometimes there's actually a struggle for me to let my moon kind of do its own thing. And then I'm born with a Moon-Mars conjunction, which shows you even more my intention to power up that moon. You see?
Sure.
So when you start to look at these things in the context of a chart, you start to kind of see, oh, okay, in the conversation between the two planets inside myself, who has more charge?
Yeah.
And so, Ashwin, in your example, like with that father, is it Moon or is it Mars? And that's going to have a lot to do with what the actions or the behavior or what we see on the outside, or what that person feels on the inside, what that would look like.
I mean, it's action. I mean, as you pointed out, reaction and action. So I mean, defense mechanism is also a part of action. So based upon
both, yeah.
So for example, a father has to protect his daughter. He has to shield. So the action is actually defense mechanism. So it could be counterattack, or it could be just kind of putting a shield and just waiting for the right time. And whether or not the father kind of breaks out or puts a shield depends upon his nature. I think that's what you're trying to say in terms of which planet has more hold in terms of what's happening. Yeah.
And so this is just, when you think about it within yourself, it just gives you a whole different, I guess, conversation to think about, instead of just, I have a moon in Leo, right?
Yes.
I mean, there's so much more
incremental.
Incremental to the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking so often the big picture just doesn't delineate the subtitles or the nuances that are really important. They're not one size fit all. I mean, there's a basic arena. It's like any person in a city or a country or family. No, I really love this, and I'm thinking, because really what people are getting out of it is just that, is to see. But you can tell me what they're getting out of it. But I'm also fascinated with some of the outer planets, like what you did come up with, whether it was Neptune or Pluto.
Well, we did all. I mean, so I mean, they're all in there from Mercury out to Pluto, right? With the moon, and I don't know that we have time to do all of them, but we can.
It's okay.
Let's just jump
the sizzle,
forward.
not the steak. Right, as they
say
in sales.
Let's just go straight for Pluto, because that's the wrap up. And Pluto was a fun one to work with, because Ashwin and his Indian and more traditional approach, like Pluto really isn't a player in that game. And so we did make sure that we both were part of writing that chapter, because we did not want the evolutionary astrologer writing the entire thing on Pluto. So that gave a whole new look at it. But here's the thing. So Moon Pluto is bridging the ego and soul. And so that really, and also consciousness and unconsciousness, right? So that piece is in there as well. So, that's a deep dive in there, versus the part of me that, is, we think about in the moon as the part of us, we talked about it being reactive. It's the part of us really that kind of gets tossed around in life, right? Things happen and we react and we bounce and we, oh my gosh, and I don't like that, and I do like this, whatever. And Pluto is, the deeper dive. It's a more steady current. It's what's at least in the evolutionary astrology way, it's the soul's deepest desire, deepest intention for growth. And that operates at a level different than just how I'm reacting to my moment, which is so much of, part of what the moon's experience is. Mm-hmm. So if you kind of want to know how your ego and soul, where they're at in sort of negotiating their bridging and how they work together, looking at that phase gives you a lot of information about that.
Yeah. I'll interject. I was going to wait there, Ashwin. I'm thinking that it's changing the story, isn't it? Because the moon has our story that we verbalize with our. Maybe that's really a big part of this, but by looking, just for instance, what you're sharing with Pluto, it expands rather than just one, just like the book, rather than one article, it's the whole phases. It's this whole dimension of how to see our story differently because of how, we're perceiving it.
Well, and some of us, like when it comes to ego and soul, some of us are needing to have more of an experience of our separate selves. That's, there's nothing wrong with that. We tend to like kind of demonize ego in our spiritual communities these days. And we wouldn't even have a separate self if, without an ego, there would be no separate self. But you can kind of see in that process whether, if the orientation is towards really kind of trying to come into that separate self, or if it's more of kind of a winding it down and almost like, truly merging it into the more of the soul sense of self. And there's not one that's good or bad or better or worse or more evolved or less evolved. It's just literally where you are in a cycle. And sometimes we think about beginnings of things as being like, somehow that's like less experience. But the truth is something else has just ended. So it's completely cyclical. Like it's not, new phase does not mean that person is, a less experienced soul or whatever. It's just simply at that moment in time. So, yeah.
I mean, it's more of a lifelong learning experience in terms of it's difficult to balance consciousness and unconsciousness. I mean, we are talking about two higher realms of spiritual or human experience. So I think it's going to be a lifelong journey in terms of how we interpret and analyze, even for astrologers, not just for normal people, to kind of bridge this gap between consciousness and unconsciousness. And by the time we do it, we'll probably be dead. So it's going to be a perennial journey. And probably if you believe life after death, I think it's probably never ending. So if you look at various Indian ideologies of karma, reincarnation, and same goes with evolutionary tradition as well. So this particular thing is never ending. The ego and soul. So ego is, soul is omnipresent. So ego is present as long as this human physical presence is existing. So.
Well, and it's this constant dance of, I want to separate and do my own thing, and I want to return back to, where I come from. So, that's it. But where we're at in the dance looks really different for different people, right? Sue, one thing, like with Neptune, which is one of my favorite ones, but with Moon Neptune, we talk partly about bridging time and timelessness, because Moon,
I love it.
Moon. I mean, I know we normally equate Saturn with time, and I do not disagree.
No, I hear you well.
But Moon is also a timekeeper, right? And the idea that there is some sort of time, and so, just like the for some of us, right? Neptune, we're more in that space. Other people are much more rooted in the Moon sort of presence of, here right now, whatever, here, what I need. And so, and again, knowing where that negotiation is or where that integration is happening, it's quite interesting, right? And it's because the Moon and Neptune are both mystical. So we talk about how, there's similarities, but then how those become different. And that's because the Moon, is terribly attached to what it needs and what it wants. And even it's, the Moon in a big part defends our self-image. Right?
You just explored a whole, I'm thinking about my chart. I have all of that in the first house. I've got Neptune, I've got the Moon and the South Node, and the Moon is separated. And by EA ways, evolutionary, 10 degrees, it'd be like, they're conjunct. It's a wide conjunct place. The Moon is the luminary. And so then now I'm thinking, but my South Node, which is in Libra, I was thinking, well, what's happened is I must have wanted to separate from the one, the all, as I'm seeing, you can think of as Neptune. We're all like this homogeneous, into being my North Node, which is Aries, right? Into like my separation. So it's like, thank you. I'm definitely a fan and an advocate now. This book is your
Neptune Moon conjunction, is it new?
Yes, it would be new. No, it is new because the faster moving planet is the Moon. So the Moon had conjunct and it's
gone past
waxing.
It.
Yeah, it's waxing.
So
I was thinking about that too. It's not.
So what you just described makes perfect sense. Your separate sense of self is trying to just get away from Neptune, right? You see?
Well,
And
but on the same time, it's all that moon business. So it's like remembering. It's like, it's it's a constant affair. It's like remembering all of the past, but then yet trying to let go and go, well, that was fine and it was wonderful. I can move on now. But who's with me?
I mean, it's like trying. I was just going to say that it's like trying to find illusion and also disillusion at the same time. So
yes, very good. Yes.
Yeah.
And just working with imagination in the meantime.
Yeah, listen to this. So I'm reading from the book. A Moon Neptune new phase person, especially at the conjunction, is particularly sensitive to the environment. The individual has just stepped through the door into a new state of consciousness and will need time to adjust. We can look at this as a baby born into a whole new world. Sometimes when we start a new cycle, we don't even recognize we've made the shift. It's doubtful a newborn baby grasps the magnitude of potential in its birth. Regardless, Moon Neptune new phase individuals are finding a new rhythm that connects them with something greater. So, and then it goes on to talk about how the moon can fall under Neptune's spell in this particular position. So, and Sue, I know you well enough to know this, right? And for some people that's frustrating because it feels like, why isn't it more accurate? Why isn't it on time? Why is it whatever? And that's what I'm saying. Part of this, you come from the space where those things don't even matter.
True.
And that's once we can understand these things a little bit more. I mean, one, it gives us more compassion for ourselves and others, but also it's like, Ashwin, I think you mentioned this, like, it's just different frequencies and different ways of tuning in. And so when we recognize, especially with your North Node in Aries, you're just figuring out how to get out of the,
well, it's most to kind of tie it together. And thank you both very, very much for all of this. I did just move to Hawaii as of a year ago today. And so with the pandemic, which we're all experiencing, India, I will have compassion, had a hard time of it. It was in the news and hope it's going better for everybody. So in other words, all of our life has been eclipsed, you could say, and we're rebirthing. So for me, in a sense, and you had aptly said, Tara, during one of our Planet Buzz that, gee, Sue, you actually moved here. You have Neptune and you moved in the middle of the ocean. But the point is I'm reconnecting with that baby's sense of where am I in the world that we are in today. Yeah. So, and this book I can see is really food for thought. Well, it's the moon, right? It's food for thought. Talking about the moon and Mercury. Yeah, nice. Astrology. The whole title. Give me the whole title again, please.
Well, it's Astrology by Moonlight. And then the subtitle is Exploring the Relationship Between Moon Phases and Planets to Improve and Illuminate Your Life. This is an uncorrected version, but this is what the book looks like. Yeah.
Oh boy, it's going to come. It'll be my Christmas gift. I know I'm ordering it. So Amazon and over here we get the Prime. You have to.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, in a nutshell, and we're having the Moonbeam team next week, folks, so we can learn about the Moonbeam and more about the moon. It's our friend here. Do you have some thought that you're hoping? There's so much that you've said for people to get out of it, but some takeaways or extra thoughts that you want to lend before we sign off in a few minutes?
I think we have said most of the things, but one thing that I would like to add is that this book can be read by anyone. So it's not just the traditional astrologer or evolutionary astrologer. And I come from a place because I say this because I have this personal experience. I'm a very predictive and an objective astrologer. So if I believe in kind of pinpoint predictions, but Tara is coming from the other side. And when both of us can kind of bring a collaboration to work together, I think reading is not a problem at all. So anyone can read this because everyone is everyone has these planetary relationships in their charts, and everyone would really want to understand what's actually going on in terms of the planetary relationships. Let's not just take into houses or signs, basic elementary planet relationships. I think it's very rich to kind of understand, to be able to understand how our inner self is going to react or act towards the anything that happens externally. So yeah.
And if you
That's
just
good.
want to learn about the phases, there's just great foundational material in here. And Ashwin, I'm going to add to what you said. The moon is about everyday people. This book is, I mean, it's meant for all of us.
Oh, thank you. I really love having you back again, Tara Aal.
Thank
and
you,
it's
Sue.
been such a pleasure to meet you, Aswin Subramanyan. I've heard
Thank you.
wonderful, kind things about you. And you have celestial vibes. And I know, Tara, you're all over the beautiful map with Isar and this wonderful book. And thank you.
It's just nice to be here and have this talk together.
Thanks for having-
Thank you, Stu, for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Bye.
Okay. Till again.
Thank you for joining us on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests connect soul growth patterns with the energetic cycles of astrology. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.